Good evening, everyone. I got stuck in traffic on the way down here, so it's going to be a casual Bible series today, but that's okay. So we finished up Genesis, and now we've already done Exodus, so now we're going to move on, and with Exodus we did Deuteronomy and Numbers as well, so now we're going to move on to Joshua. And Joshua, the next two books are some of my favorite books, Joshua and Judges. And if you had to pick, if you put them into movie genres, these next ones are like the action films, because it's all action, it's all heroes, and Judges is straight up superheroes, and Joshua is very much like the adventure conquest, and it's pretty fun. Now I'll admit, this is more of the guys' books. If we get to Song of Songs and that kind of stuff, that's more the romance and that kind of stuff, but Joshua's a good time. So we're going to begin in chapter 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, "My servant Moses is dead. Now proceed to cross the Jordan, you and all the people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the Israelites, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon I have given to you, as I promised to Moses." So if we remember that we ended with Moses wasn't able to enter because he had some hesitation and he had some issues with eating it. So the whole previous generation has died off. The whole generation, the adults that left Egypt, have died off, and now it's a new generation that haven't known Egypt, and now they're entering into the promised land. And that's going to be really the thing. So we're going to see, that's going to be the big theme of Joshua, is Israel being Israel. And you're going to see a lot of this, God is saying you're not allowed to compromise with the people around you. Because we just saw that how often did the Israelites try to turn back to Egypt? And Moses basically had to drag them as far as they could. And so you don't want to lose your identity. That's the big thing. Because their identity is that relationship with God. And if they surrender that, whether that's to absorbed into Egypt or absorbed into the Canaanite tribes, then they're not going to be Hebrew anymore, and they're not going to have that relationship with God. And we've seen them so often fall that way. So that's why God is going to be very protective of his people. From the wilderness and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, the great sea in the west shall be your territory. No one shall be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall put this people in possession of the land that I swore to their ancestors to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to act in accordance with all the laws of my servant Moses commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, so that you may be successful wherever you go. This book of the laws shall not depart out of your mouth. You shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to act in accordance with all that is written in it. For when you shall make you a great, and it shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall be successful. I hereby command you, be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Okay, God is giving him the game plan, and he's saying, don't stray to the left or to the right. Do what I've told you, and you'll be successful. Now, and again, good piece of foreshadowing, we know they're probably going to stray one way or the other, because there wouldn't be much of a story if they just said, and then they just followed God perfectly, and the end. But no, we're going to see what happens. We're going to see how they stray. But again, God isn't doing this to be mean. This is the thing. I'm giving you these rules to be successful. If you follow these rules, you will be successful. And it's not that I'm blessing you, it's that these rules lead to success, to prosperity. So that's why I give them to you. I don't give them just to be a mean arbitrator. No, I give them because this is the way you'll be success. When Joshua commanded the officers of the people pass through the camp and command the people, prepare your provisions, for in 3 days you are to cross the Jordan, to go and to take possession of the land that the Lord your God gives you to possess. To the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the words that Moses, your servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. But all the warriors you shall cross over armed before your kindred and shall help them, until the Lord gives rest to your kindred as well as to you, and they take possession of the land that the Lord your God is given them, when you shall return to your own land and take possession of it. The land of Moses, the servant of your Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan to the east. So this is Reuben, who is the oldest, and this is Manasseh, who is the oldest of Joseph, the half-tribe, and Gad. I don't know if Gad has a specific reason why he did it too, but these are the ones who kind of failed at leadership. We saw how Reuben was trying to be the leader, and it never quite worked out, and Judah became the main leader. And so too we saw the younger son of Joseph was going to be the more powerful Ephraim, and he'll be the center of the northern kingdom. And so they are the ones who stay on the other side of the Jordan. And you notice how they say, Moses gave you the land, as opposed to the land that the Lord has given you. So it's that separation. But he made a deal, and God's willing to compromise even with us. And so he kind of do them. But they still have to come out and fight. They answered Joshua, all that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you, so as was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your orders and disobeys your words, whatever you command shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. Okay, we're starting out pretty good. We're with you. We'll do what you ask. We're following you. Okay, we're starting out pretty good. The spies who were sent to Jericho, this is chapter 2. Then Joshua, son of Nun, sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and spent the night there. Okay, so this is one area where we have to be careful with terms. So the term is prostitute, but it's also kind of like house of ill repute. And so the line between inn and prostitution during this time can be fuzzy. So I've seen lots of scholars who say she might not have actually been a full-fledged prostitute, but she might have just been offering an inn. Either way, it doesn't really matter, because the main thing is we're going to see how she responds. Because even we've already seen Tamar with Judah, and we're going to see her. And so it's not about where you are, it's more about where you're going. And of course, Mary Magdalene's the famous example of that. But just so you're aware, I've had biblical scholars who got very mad about us doing harm to Rahab's name. The king of Jericho was told, some Israelites have come here tonight to search out the land. Then the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, bring out the men who have come to you, who enter your house, for they have come only to search out the whole land. But the woman took 2 men and hid them. Then she said, true, the men came to me, but I did not know where they came from. And when it was time to close the gate at dark, the men went out. When the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you can overtake them. She said, However, she brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid on the roof. So the men pursued them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords. As soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before they went to sleep, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that dread of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt in fear before you. For we have heard now that the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea before you when you came up out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites, and who were beyond the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. As soon as they heard it, our hearts failed, and there was no courage left in any of us because of you. The Lord our God, the Lord your God is indeed God in heaven above all, on earth below. And then, since I have dealt kindly with you, swear to me by the Lord that you in turn will deal kindly with my family. Give me a sign of good faith, that you will spare my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. The men said to her, Our life for yours. If you do not tell this business of ours, then we will deal kindly and faithfully with you when the Lord gives us the land. So, Rahab's response is very, very important because it's setting a precedent for the rest of the book. So we're going to see that you can respond to the coming of Joshua and the coming of the Hebrews in 2 ways. Both of them is fear, but then how do you respond to that? So Rahab, we talked in our gospel, proper fear of the Lord. Rahab has proper fear of the Lord. She sees it coming. She says, you guys are powerful. Not only that, but your God is obviously God, and so I want to be with you. So you can go in 2 directions. You can either say, I want to be with you, and I will follow your God. Let me join you. Or you can say, I'm scared of what you're doing, so I'm going to fight you. So this is the big tension between the people of the land and the Hebrews. And God's going to make it very clear, you can't compromise with the people because you can't be them. Because whenever you compromise with the people, you end up worshiping their gods, you end up falling into their sins. Okay, so no. But we're going to see several examples that the people can become Hebrew. And Rahab is the first small example of that. And so Rahab is going to join. So there's kind of a choice going on. It's an implicit choice. You can join the Hebrews and join God, or you can stand against them. And you can't compromise. It's that faith. You can't be half-hearted with your faith. You can't be lukewarm. It's an in and out relationship. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the outer side of the city wall. Remember that. Her house is in the city wall. Go towards the hill country so that the pursuers may not come upon you. Hide yourselves there for 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterwards you may go on your way. The men said to her, We will be released from this oath that you have made us swear to you. If we invade the land and do not tie this crimson cord in the window through which you let us down, and you do not gather into your house your father and mother and your brothers and all your family, if any of you go out of the doors of your house into the streets, they shall be responsible for their own death, and we shall be innocent. But if a hand laid upon any who are with you in the house, we shall bear the responsibilities for their death. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be released from the oath, and that you made us swear to you. She said, According to your words, so be it. She sent them away, and they departed. Then she tied the crimson cord in the window. They departed and went into the hill country and stayed there for 3 days until the pursuers returned. The pursuers had searched all along the way and found nothing. Then the 2 men came down again to the hill country. They crossed over, came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him all that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, Truly the Lord has given all the land into your hands. Moreover, all the inhabitants of the land melt in fear before us. Early in the morning, Joshua rose and set on... just a quick, compare this. Remember when they first got to the land in Exodus and they sent spies to reconnoiter the land and they came back and they were like, oh no, we can't do it. These people are too big. And even though it's really rich, we can't do it. And they were really scared. Now it's reversed. Now they're scared of the Hebrews. Now the Hebrews are saying, yes, let's go take the land. Even though they just had this narrowing escape experience, they're saying, no, it's time for us to go up and take it. So another good sign showing how this generation has improved upon the previous generation. Early in the morning Joshua rose and set out from Shittim with all the Israelites, and they came to the Jordan. They camped there before crossing over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, "When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place. Follow it so that you may know the way you should go. For you have not passed this way before. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, a distance of about 2,000 cubits." Remember, a cubit is from here to here, so like 2 feet. "Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." To the priest Jordan said, "Take up the ark of the covenant and pass on from it in front of the people." So they took up the ark of the covenant and went in front of the people. The Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they may know that I will be with you as I was with Moses. You are the ones who shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant. Then when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Joshua then said to the Israelites, "Draw near and hear the words of the Lord your God." Joshua said, "By this you shall know that among you is the living God, who without fail will drive out from before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. The ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is going to pass before you into the Jordan. So now select 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. Then the soles of their feet of the priests then bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, rests in the waters of the Jordan. The water of the Jordan flowing from above shall be cut off, and they shall stand in a single heap." Then the people set out from their tents to cross over to the Jordan. The priests bearing the ark of the covenant were in front of the people. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of the harvest. So where those who bore the ark had come to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the edge of the waters flowing from above stood still, rising up in a single heap, far off at Adam, the city that is beside Zerathon, while those flowing towards the sea of the Arabah, the Dead Sea, were wholly cut off, when the people crossed over opposite Jordan, while all Israel were crossing over on dry ground. The priest who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan until the entire nation finished crossing over the Jordan. So, of course, this should remind us of the parting of the Red Sea. Now, it's a little bit different. It's actually explained a little bit differently, and it's kind of interesting. And it kind of makes sense considering if the one is a sea versus a river. So in a sea, you have more stable water. And so remember that the wind came down and it split, and it was like 2 walls on either side. This time, it gets split, but now it's just keeping up like a heap. So it sounds like it's building up on this side, and then it dries off on the other side because there's no more flow. So it's the difference between a river and a sea. So there's not 2 walls, there's just one heap. And it's kind of funny too. Now, it would be a much smaller example. If you ever get a chance to go to Israel, you'll see Jordan. It's barely a river. Now, to be true, at this time it would have been, this is before it was dammed and everything like that, so it would have been a little bit wider, but compared to like an Ohio river, it's not. Now, the crucial thing about the Jordan is that it's there all year round. Whereas most of the water in Israel are wadis, which means they're seasonal rivers. Like during the rainy season, they'll become rivers, but then they'll dry up. They'll be riverbeds. Here, the Jordan flows all year round. And so in a place like the Middle East and a place like Israel, that's an important thing, not only for a boundary, but also as a source of life. So that's just a thing to think about. When the entire nations had finished crossing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Set 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, and command them, take 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood. Carry them over with you and lay them down in the place where you camp tonight." Then Joshua summoned the 12 men from the Israelites, whom he had appointed, one from each tribe. Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, one for each of the tribes of Israel, so that they may be a sign among you when your children ask in a time to come that what do those stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off in front of the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, so that these stones shall be to the Israelites a memorial forever." So this is very much like, if you remember, like after Jacob first was in the land, and when he was leaving actually, and he wrestled with the angel, and then he set up an altar. And now we have this other moment where they're like setting up those memorial stones. And specifically why they're taking stones from the river, it's symbolic because that's what they just crossed, but also the stones would look different. So if you have a river stone, one that's having water rushing on it, it's going to be smooth compared to like more of a desert where the wind is blowing it. It doesn't look the same. So when you have these 12 stones arranged that look completely different, well, where did you get those stones? That's that click. So it would have looked different. It wouldn't have just looked like a pile of stones. The Israelites did as Joshua commanded. They took up 12 stones out of the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of Israel. And the Lord told Joshua, "Carry them over to a place where they camped and laid them down." Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan in the place where the feet of the priests began of the ark of the covenant and stood, and they are there to this day. The priest who bore the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything was finished, that the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the people according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. The people crossed over in haste. As soon as all the people had finished crossing over, the ark of the Lord and the priests crossed over in front of the people. The Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over armed before the Israelites, as Moses had ordered them. About 40,000 armed for war crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for battle. So imagine just those priests standing there, and they're holding there, and they're there for a while. They're going to have to be there for a while because it's going to take this massive host of people to cross. So it's, again, that idea of like sacrificing, they're being the stones. And it's kind of goes back to that idea of like Aaron and Joshua holding up Moses' hands during the battle so that the Israelites will win the battle. It's that stability that kind of it reminds us of. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him, as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. The Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant to come up out of the Jordan." Joshua therefore commanded the priests, "Come up out of the Jordan." When the priests, hearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord, came up from the middle of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. Those 12 stones which they had taken up out of the Jordan, Joshua sent up to Gilgal, saying to the Israelites, "When your children ask their parents in a time to come, 'What do these stones mean?' then you shall let your children know, 'Israel crossed over the Jordan here on dry ground.' For the Lord your God has dried up the waters of the Jordan, and for you until you crossed over, the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until he crossed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of God is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So again, point out that line so that all the peoples of the earth might know. This is meant to be a symbol to all the peoples. And that's going to be important when you see the interactions between Joshua and the other people in the land. Okay, where are we at? When the king of the Amorites beyond the Jordan to the west, and to the kings of the Canaanites by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan from the Israelites until they had crossed over, their hearts failed, and there was no longer any spirit in them because of the Israelites. At that time the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites a second time." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gibeath Haraloth. This is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All of the males of the people who came out of Egypt, all the warriors, had died during their journey through the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt. Although all the peoples who came out had been circumcised, yet all the peoples born of the journey through the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt had not been circumcised. So this is very similar to, you remember when Moses was going down to Egypt and his son wasn't circumcised and his wife ended up doing it, and it was that symbol of this is now we're shedding blood, we're shedding from our source of life, and now that we've shed blood, we're ready to do it. So the fact that they've kind of failed to do that up at that point is like, oh, well, we need to get right. We aren't quite right now, but now we'll be right. So it was their children whom he raised up in their place, and that Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. When the circumcising of all the nations was done, they remained in that place and camp until they were healed. Makes sense. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away from you the disgrace of Egypt," and so that place is called Gilgal to this day. While the Israelites were encamped in Gilgal, they kept the Passover in the evening of the 14th day of the month in the plains of Jericho. On the day after the Passover, on the very day, they ate the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain. The manna ceased on that day. They ate the produce of the land, and that Israelites no longer had manna. They ate the crops of the land of Canaan that year. So we've now basically fully transitioned to this new generation. We've seen that crossing from death to life. It's that baptismal imagery of the Jordan, just like the Red Sea. And just as that generation was reborn, this generation is reborn. Now they're off the manna because they don't need to be supported by that anymore, and they're circumcised, so they're ready to go. This is a good thing that they're eating the fruit of the land and that they can support themselves. Once when Joshua was near Jericho is like the biggest city crossing in what is now like eastern Israel. And so it's like it would have been the first big city after you cross the Jordan. That's why Jericho becomes the focal point, because it's like if you were coming up from the south and you enter through New Orleans, because it's the big port. It's a big city and it's a big center. But of course, by big city we mean 30,000 people, maybe. Big city, there weren't cities like we have cities. And remember, that's the pettiness of all the kings too. Every little town has its own king. And so these aren't like grand kings, these are petty tyrants. Once when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing before him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you one of us or one of our adversaries?" He replied, "Neither, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have come now." And Joshua fell on his face and onto the earth and worshipped. And he said to him, "Why do you command your servant, my God?" The commander of the army of the Lord said to Joshua, "Remove the sandals from your feet. The place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. Then Jericho was shut up inside and out because of the Israelites. No one came out and no one went in. The Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have handed Jericho over to you, along with its king and soldiers. You shall march around the city, all the warriors circling the city once. Thus you shall do for 6 days, with 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, the priests blowing the trumpets. When they made a long blast with the ram's horn, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and all the people shall charge straight ahead. So Joshua, son of Nun, summoned the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and have 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark of the Lord. To the people he said, go forward and march around this city. Have the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord. So I love the fact that we're going to call him Michael because it's the head of the army. Michael shows up and he is, which side are you on? Neither. And I love that because it kind of takes the wind out of your sails, but it's also that reminder that, God is bigger than us. And so we might see like God is fully focused on no, God has other buns in the oven. He has other things. So yeah, he might be taking care of you now, but it's not the only thing. And so I like that there's that kind of separation, and it kind of shows you that the immensity of God. And then of course he gives them the plan. He tells them 7 times. And on the 7th day, do it. March around the city once a day for 7 days. On the 7th day, do it 7 times with 7 priests. If you guys remember, 7 is the number of covenant. To form a covenant is to 7th oneself. And so this is that reminder of the covenant and a reminder of having faith in God. As Joshua had commanded the people, the 7 priests carried the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord, went forward, blowing the trumpets. Blowing the trumpets with the ark of the covenant of the Lord following them. And the armed men went before priests who blew the trumpets. The rear guard came after the ark while the trumpets blew continually. To the people Joshua gave this command, you shall not shout or let your voice be heard, nor shall you utter a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout, so that the ark of the Lord went through the city, circling it once, and then they came into the camp and spent the night in the camp. So if you see this from the perspective of Jericho, they seem kind of crazy. They're not building siege weapons. They're not doing anything. They have their priests blowing horns with their fancy gold box, and they're just making a big circle outside the city. And you can imagine that would take some time, because it's still going to take a long while to walk around the whole walls, especially because you got to be out of arrow shot. So you're taking a big circle around there. So from their perspective, what are these crazy Hebrews doing? But remember, they've already heard stories of the Hebrews parting the Red Sea and defeating Og and Sidon, and so this is where they get to make their choice kind of situation. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the covenant. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord passed on, blowing the trumpets continually. The armed man went before them. I already did that part. On the 7th day, they rose early, because they got to march 7 times. They got to wake up early, and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. It was only on that day that they marched around the city 7 times. And at the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, shout, for the Lord has given you this city. The city of all that is in shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab, the prostitute, and all who are with her in her house shall live, because she hid the messengers we sent. As for you, keep away from the things devoted to destruction, so as not to covet, and take away any of the devoted things, and make the camp of Israel an object of destruction, bringing trouble upon it. But all silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord. So that the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. As soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpet, they raised a great shout, and the wall fell down flat. So the people charged straight ahead into the city and captured it. Then they devoted to destruction by the edge of the sword all in the city, both men and women, young and old, oxen, sheep, and donkeys. Okay, so this is going to be the hard part for our modern sensibilities. Why do they have to kill everybody? And again, it's that idea of you can't mix. So this is you can't compromise with evil. The people, and sometimes they're literally worshiping demons, and they would be sacrificing children to Amalek and things like that. But it's also that idea of you can't serve two masters. You can only serve one. And if they stay in the land, it's going to cause problems. But there was an out, because we've seen Rahab is the out. And this is even kind of the, we'll see that in the next section. This is kind of the hidden miracle that we're going to see in just a second. But so this is that idea that we can't compromise with evil. That's how you have to think of it. We're not compromising with evil. And more so, why they have to put all the other stuff to the sword is that they're not doing this for plunder. They're not doing this to be Vikings and just take all the good stuff. No, all the stuff that's valuable that they're keeping is getting specifically dedicated to God, so there's not real plunder. And we're going to see what happens when there is plunder. So this isn't meant to be that kind of conquest. Joshua said to the two men who had spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring the woman out of it and all who belong to her, as you swore to her." So the young men who had been spies went in and brought Rahab out, along with her father, her mother, and her brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought all her kindred out. They set them outside the camp of Israel. They burned down the city and everything in it. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. But Rahab the prostitute, with her family, and all who belonged to her, Joshua spared. Her family has lived in Israel ever since, for she hid the messengers from Joshua sent to the spies out of Jericho. Joshua then pronounced this oath here: "Cursed before the Lord be anyone who tries to build this city, this Jericho. At the cost of this firstborn he shall lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest he shall set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in the land. Okay, now here's the kind of hidden miracle if you pay attention. So, do you remember where Rahab's house was? It was in the wall. It was in the wall. And what fell down? The wall. So how does Joshua know where Rahab is? Because her house didn't fall. So you see this, like imagine this whole city and the whole giant wall, and they walked around and it all collapses. And the dust is in the air because of the collapse. And then it settles. And then there's just a single spike or pillar of wall left, and with a red cord hanging out of it. And again, the red cord, the blood that saved those two people, and now saving this family, and now the family are going to be incorporated into Israel. They live in Israel. More so than that, Rahab is in the line of Christ. She's one of the specific women that is mentioned, including Tamar. And so it's one of those ones that it's very like, okay, we are supposed to pay attention. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to become part of Israel. It requires you giving up your identity. You don't get to be Jerichoan or a Jerichonite anymore. You have to be Israel. So that is the option. You can become part of Israel, but there's no compromising. So it's one or the other. And so that's kind of going to be the kind of subtlety of this. And I shouldn't even say it's subtle. It's very clear that Rahab is an important character, and that is because she, again, in the line of Christ, make this big effort about her. You notice the spies aren't named. The spies aren't named. Who cares? Rahab is named. She's the star. She's the star character. She'd be being played by the A-lister. Joshua and Rahab would be the A-listers that would be on the poster of the movie of Joshua. So that's it. Okay. We're going to end with chapter 7 because we're going to show what happens when you plunder, and then we're going to go on from there. So, but the Israelites broke faith in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things, and the anger of the Lord burned against the Israelites. So he is not listening to the band. We're going to see this come up even so far as when you have David and you have the first kings of Israel, this is going to become a recurring issue of using things appropriately, that we're not conquesting just for our own sake, for plunder. We're conquesting because we need to purify ourselves and purify the land, and this land is for us. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth-aven, east of Bethel. Remember, Beth means house, so all these cities are named house of something, like Bethel is specifically house of God. El is one title for God. And said to them, "Go up and spy out the land." Well, this sounds familiar, so he's sending some more spies. And the men went up and spied on Ai. Then they returned to Joshua and said to him, "Not all the people need go up. About 2,000 or 3,000 men should go up and attack Ai, since they are so few. Do not make the whole people toil up there." So about 3,000 of the people went up there, and they fled before the men of Ai. The men of Ai killed about 36 of them, chasing them from outside of the gate as far as Shebarim, and killed them on the slope. The hearts of the people failed, and they turned to water. So turning to water is like having like rubber knees or something like that. It just means when you're turned to water, it means it's one of their ancient phrases. So if your insides turn to water, it means you're weak or fail. So you can see they sent up 3,000 men, and only 36 died, which means they kind of turned and ran really quickly. So it wasn't like there was a harsh battle or anything. And now we're going to find out why this happens. Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell on the ground on his face before the ark of the Lord until the evening, he and the elders of Israel, and they put the dust on their heads. Joshua said, "Ah, Lord God, why have you brought this people across the Jordan at all to hand it over to the Amorites so as to destroy us? Would that we had been content to settle beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say? Now the Israelite has turned their backs to their enemies. The Canaanites and the inhabitants of the land will hear of it and surround us and cut us from our name from the land. Then what will you do for your great name?" The Lord said to Joshua, "Stand up." So Joshua's having a little faulty conscience right here. So it's the first time we've seen him have a little bit of an issue. "Stand up. And why have you fallen upon your face? Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant that I imposed on them. They have taken some of the devoted things they have stolen. They have acted deceitfully, and they have put them among their own belongings. Therefore, the Israelites are unable to stand before their enemies. They turn their backs to their enemies because they have become a thing devoted for destruction themselves." So the symbol that they're plundering, I've taken in this sin, and that thing was set to be destroyed, so I'm taking in that destruction into myself. What a beautiful isn't the right word because it's a symbol of sin. But again, what happens when we take in sin? When the church says, "Don't do this." Well, because we're taking destruction into ourselves. That's what happens when we take sin into ourselves. It kills us from the inside. So there are certain things you have to let die, and sin is one of those things. "I will be with you no more unless you destroy the devoted things from among you. Proceed to sanctify the people and say, 'Sanctify yourselves for today, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, where there are devoted things among you, O Israel, you will be unable to stand before your enemies until you take them away, devoted things from among you. In the morning before you shall come forward, tribe by tribe. The tribe that the Lord shall take come near by clans, and clan that the Lord shall take come near the households. And the households that the Lord takes shall come near one by one. And the one who is taken as having the devoted things shall be burned with fire, together with all that he has, for having transgressed the covenant of the Lord and for having done an outrageous thing in Israel." So Joshua rose early in the morning and brought Israel near tribe by tribe, and the tribe of Judah was taken. He brought near the clans of Judah, and the clan of Zerahites was taken. Then he brought near the clan of the Zerites, family by family. And Zabdi was taken, and he brought near his household one by one, and Archan, son of Camri, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was taken. So, they had this long, drawn-out process, and it's almost like the whodunit at the end. And this is kind of like giving him the chance to fess up. Okay, admit it, it's getting closer. The destruction is coming closer to you. I told you the destruction is going to be if you don't admit it, and yet I still hold back. And so he's given a chance. Each one of those layers is giving him a chance to come forward, and he doesn't. Then Joshua said to Achan, "My son, give glory to the Lord, God of Israel, and make confession to him. Tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me." And Achan answered Joshua, "It is true. I am the one who sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I did when I saw some among the spoil, a beautiful mantle from Shinar, and 2,000 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels. Then I coveted them and took them. They now lie hidden in the ground inside my tent, with the silver underneath." So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there he was hidden in the tent with the silver underneath. They took them out of the tent and brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and they spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua and all of Israel took Achan, son of Zerah, with the silver, the mantle, and the bar of gold, and his sons and daughters with the oxen, donkeys, and sheep, and his tent, and all that they had, and they brought them up to the valley of Achor. Joshua said, "Why did you bring trouble on us? The Lord is bringing trouble on you today." And all Israel stoned him to death. They burned them with fire, cast stones on them, and raised over him a heap of stones that remains to this day, that the Lord turned from his burning anger. Therefore the place to this day is called the Valley of Achor. So again, fear of the Lord, having proper fear of the Lord. Rahab showed fear of the Lord. Achor did not. Achor didn't think he'd get caught, so he did this thing. He didn't admit to it when he had the chance, and finally he has to face the consequences of his sin. Sin has consequences. God is trying to prevent you from seeing those consequences. He really doesn't want you to sin because he really wants to preserve you from that, but sin has consequences. Okay, we're going to end with the destruction of Ai, and then we're going to part for the next week is one of my favorite sections, which is the renewal of the covenant and the Gibeonites, who are really cool. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear or be dismayed. Take all the fighting men with you and grow up now to Ai." So remember when they did it, Ai will be easy. Just take 3,000 men. And again, they're getting confident. They're getting lackadaisical. They're getting overconfident in themselves and not dependent on the Lord. So now they're going with all the men. "You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king. Only its spoils and its livestock you may take as booty for yourselves. Set an ambush against the city behind it." So Joshua and all the fighting men set out to go up against Ai. Joshua chose 30,000 warriors and sent them out by night with this command: "You shall lie in ambush against the city. Behind it, do not go very far from the city, but all of you stay alert. I and all the people who are with me will approach the city. When they come out against us, as before, we shall flee from them. They will come out after us until we have drawn them away from the city, for they will say, 'They are fleeing from us as before.' While they flee from us, you shall rise up from the ambush and seize the city, for the Lord your God will give it to your hand. And then you have taken the city, you shall set the city on fire, doing as the Lord has ordered. See, I have commanded you." So Joshua sent them out, and they went to the place of ambush and lay between Bethel and Ai. So the west of Ai Joshua sent up the night of his camp. So he has a plan. We're going to set an ambush. We're going to lure them out. They're going to think we're weak again, and we're going to turn it to our advantage. And this actually shows the leadership of Joshua, that he's being clever and he's being forward-thinking, and that he's a good military strategy. And so it's a good thing. Joshua's kind of reclaiming his little bit of hesitancy that we saw in the previous chapters. In the morning, Joshua rose early and mustered the people and went up, and the elders of Israel before the people of Ai. All the fighting men who were with them went up. They drew near before the city and camped on the north side of Ai, in the ravine between them and Ai. Taking about 5,000 men, he set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai, and on the west of the city. So they stationed the forces, the main encampment, in the north of the city, and its rear guard west of the city. But Joshua spent that night in the valley. When the king of Ai saw this, he said to all his people, the inhabitants of the city hurried out early in the morning to the meeting place facing the Arabah to meet Israel in battle. But he did not know that there was an ambush against him behind the city. And Joshua and all of Israel made a pretense of being beaten before them and fled in the direction of the wilderness. So all the people who were there in the city were called together to pursue them. And they pursued Joshua, and they drew away from the city. There was not a man left in Ai and Bethel, who did not go and take Israel. They left the city open and pursued Israel. So he kind of let them destroy themselves. You know, if they're so greedy for destruction that they want to do it, that they leave their entire city unguarded, and they're not getting anything from killing them. They might get some swords and stuff, but not much else. And so this kind of lets them lead to their own destruction. Then the Lord said to Joshua, stretch out your sword that is in your hand towards Ai, for I will give it into your hand. And Joshua stretched out the sword that was in his hand towards the city. As soon as he stretched out his hand, the troops in ambush rose quickly out of their place and rushed forward. They entered the city, took it, and at once set the city on fire. So when the men of Ai looked back, the smoke of the city was rising to the sky. They had no power to flee this way or that, for the people who fled to the wilderness turned back against the pursuers. Then Joshua and Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city and that the smoke of the city was rising. Then they turned back and struck down the men of Ai, and the others came out and the city against them. And they surrounded by Israelites, some on one side and some on the other. And Israelites struck them down until no one was left who survived or escaped. But the king of Ai was taken alive and brought to Joshua. Then Israel was finished slaughtering all the inhabitants of Ai in the open wilderness where they pursued them. And when all of them, to the very last, had taken by the edge of the sword, all Israel returned to Ai and attacked it with the edge of the sword. The total of all those who fell that day, both men and women, was 12,000, all the people of Ai. For Joshua did not draw back his hand with which he stretched out the sword, until he was utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai. Only the livestock and the spoil of the city Israel took as their booty, according to the word of the Lord, and he had issued to Joshua. So Joshua burned Ai and made it forever a heap of ruins, as it is to this day. And he hanged the king of Ai on a tree until evening, and at sunset Joshua commanded that they took his body down from the tree, threw it down at the entrance of the gate of the city, and raised over it a great heap of stones, which stands there to this day. If you notice, we keep on having this to this day, to this day, to this day. And again, that's a reminder of these markers. So we started with those 12 markers, and it's that reminder that we need to be faithful constantly and forever. And so these are the eternal markers, that if we're faithful to God, God will be faithful to us, and that there is no compromise. Again, you have to think of this like the marriage bond that we've seen compared. You can't share your marriage. You can't share your spouse. God will not share the people of Israel with other gods or with other peoples. Now, he's willing to let other people come in, but he won't share. And that's the message. And that's true for our own faith. You can't compromise your faith. You can't be, well, I'm sort of Catholic. I'm sort of Christian, but I like these other things. Nope. You got to be Christian. No lukewarm. And so that's kind of the message of Joshua. Okay, we're going to stop there. Next time, like I said, we're going to do the Gibeonites, which is one of my favorite stories and really hones in on this. But we're going to end there for tonight. So, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. Have a good night, everybody.